All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Rowan, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to the What to Know About H2O webinar. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, but for now, you may notice that you're muted. We ask that everybody remain muted for the duration of the webinar. You can also take a moment to find the chat and the Q&A function. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We're going to give others a few minutes to join the conversation, and we're going to jump right into our webinar. All right, if you're just joining us, again, welcome to the What to Know About H2O webinar. This webinar is hosted in partnership with Think Blue San Diego. We're going to use the chat function to share resources. When you're using this function, please ensure that you click all panelists and attendees. That way everybody can see your messages. We're also going to use the Q&A option to add questions throughout our webinar. You can use the up voting or the thumbs up if you want the answer to a particular question that was asked. We're going to give everyone another minute or two to join, and then we are going to begin. Meanwhile, you may want to grab a pen and paper for notes or activities. Thanks again for being here. We're going to get started soon. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rowan, and I am the Youth Education Coordinator with I Love a Clean San Diego, and I'm here with Val, and she's going to be our presenter today. Welcome to our What to Know About H2O webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing ways to reduce the amount of waste that we produce here in San Diego. For our final Q&A session, we're going to be bringing on representatives from Think Blue San Diego and the City of San Diego Public Utilities Department. And they're going to help us answer any questions that you have about the water conservation rebate programs. So you may notice that you are all muted, and we're going to ask you to remain muted throughout the webinar. We have the chat function where everyone can share links and ideas and resources. Please ensure that it says send to everyone so everybody can be receiving these. And then we're going to just use the Q&A option to ask questions throughout the webinar so they don't get lost in the chat. Just add your questions in the Q&A option. We're going to have dedicated time to answer questions throughout the presentation as well as at the end of the webinar. And then a few days after this webinar, you're going to receive a follow-up email, and that's going to include all the questions, all the links that we're going to be sending, and a recording of this webinar, which you can view for up to 2 weeks. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Val, and thanks everyone for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Rowan. Hi, everyone. I'm Val. I am the Community Education Manager here at iLove. And thank you so much for being here today for our What to Know About H2O webinar. The goal for today is really to teach you why water conservation is important, how it contributes to pollution prevention, and introduce you to some rebates that Think Blue San Diego provides for making water-saving changes to your home. We'll dive into all of that in just a moment, but briefly, I want to mention a little bit about I Love a Clean San Diego. Some of you might be familiar with us or have attended our webinars before, but if you haven't, we've been around for just over 65 years, and our vision is a zero waste, litter-free, and environmentally engaged San Diego region. So we touch on topics regarding pollution prevention, resource conservation, and waste reduction. And today we are really grateful to be partnering with Think Blue San Diego, the city's stormwater department, to bring you this webinar. Like Rowan said, we do have a few Think Blue representatives on the call. We'll be bringing them on for a Q&A at the end of our presentation. So if you have a question at any point during our slides or at any point during the webinar, feel free to put it in the Q&A. We'll have a few breaks where Rowan and I will answer questions. And then at the end, we can really get into the details with our friends over at Think Blue. So let's jump right in. and start by talking about why water conservation is important. Access to fresh, clean water is, of course, very important to us for a variety of reasons: hydration, hygiene, irrigation, recreation, and there really is only a small amount of fresh water readily available to us on Earth. 97% of our planet's water is salt water, which we can't use for watering plants, drinking, or cleaning, or much else. And that leaves 3% of all of the water in the world. Most of that, 2.4% of Earth's water, is frozen in ice caps and glaciers. The last 0.6% of our planet's water is non-frozen fresh water. However, some of that is groundwater or it's polluted. So only 0.003% of all of the water on Earth is fresh, clean, and available for us to use. This might not sound like enough, but luckily our planet's water cycle serves as a natural recycling system. However, with increased amounts of pollution in our environment and a long series of droughts in California, it's important that we do what we can to conserve. With that in mind, it's also important to know where our water comes from. In the city of San Diego, the average person uses about 103 gallons of water per day. And to help you imagine how much that is, that's about 2.5 bathtubs worth of water. Rowan is linking this really great resource in the chat to a data hub where you can see water usage across the county and across different parts of San Diego. So I encourage you to check that out. But that number is pretty staggering, 103 gallons a day per person. We have an average annual rainfall of about 10 inches. And because of this, the San Diego region needs to purchase water from Northern California and access it from the Colorado River. So here in the San Diego region, 50% of our water comes from the Colorado River. The Colorado River supports over 30 million people across the southwestern United States in California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Wyoming, and Colorado. Another 30% of our region's water comes from Northern California, and those inputs come from rivers fed by the Sierra Nevada snows. And then they're pumped down here through aqueducts and pipes. And another 20% comes from local sources. So our reservoirs, wastewater recycling, and desalination. And there's a link coming in the chat and in the follow-up email with an even more detailed breakdown of our water sources. It's important to keep in mind that there are some issues that come with receiving so much of our water from outside the region. Diverting water threatens species populations and ecosystems in the places we're diverting the water from. And energy use and costs are pretty high to move water as well. Since we're coastal, people often bring up desalination as a solution. However, desalination is really energy intensive. And there's also an issue when it comes to water security and resiliency, which is just ensuring reliable access to safe, clean water. All of this is important no matter where you live, but it's extra important here in California because we're prone to droughts. And those of us who have lived in California a long time are very familiar with droughts, but what does it mean and what does it look like? A drought, as you might know, is a long period where we have less rain than normal, and it's affecting our water availability. And according to drought.gov, currently the entire state of California is classified as abnormally dry, with about 68% of the state in a severe drought. And being in a drought leads to things like legislation and potential water restrictions. And here in San Diego County, zooming in a little bit more, 2021 was the 39th driest year to date in the past 127 years. And in the most recent water year, a water year is October 2020 to September 2021, San Diego received about half its average rainfall. And the most recent period of exceptional drought, some of you might remember 2014 to 2017, was that period of exceptional drought. So currently there's nowhere in the state that is considered to be in exceptional drought, but things can change quickly with the instability of our weather and temperatures. So you can check out drought.gov for even more statistics. They update it really frequently. It's pretty interesting to take a look at. And you can see more details about what qualifies as exceptional drought versus moderate drought. But all of these stats and figures are just here to emphasize that water conservation is important, as our water supply can change and our drought severity can change. Water conservation also has a really close relation to pollution prevention. And we'll get into that in just a moment, but I want to pause here for a quick Q&A break. I know it's early, but Rowan, I'm going to turn it over to you to see if any questions came through during our first couple of slides there.
Hi, Val. Thanks so much. So we did just have one question come in from Parag. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly. Why in San Diego don't we do rainwater harvesting?
Oh, great question. On a large scale, that's something I can't speak to. We are going to get a little bit into how you can harvest rainwater at home towards the end of our time together. We'll talk about some rebates you can receive for that. We'll hang on to that until then. And if you still have questions on a larger scale, we can answer them at the end. But thanks for bringing that up.
Perfect. And that's all the questions we have at the moment, Val.
Awesome. Thanks, Rowan. Yeah, if you have any other questions, like I said, feel free to add them in the chat or Q&A, excuse me, as we go. And we'll pause a couple more times. But for now, we can keep plugging along to dive in a little bit more into how stormwater and rainwater is connected to pollution prevention. So stormwater pollution does affect all of our waterways. And here on the screen, you can see the journey of a storm drain. We are probably all familiar with storm drains and have seen storm drains all around the county. And storm drains are in place to carry water away from our roads and neighborhoods during a storm so that we don't have a flood. That rainwater can pick up pollutants, whether it's oil, litter, fertilizer, brake dust. It can carry all of those different kinds of pollutants into the storm drains. And storm drains, their journey starts on our streets in our neighborhoods. That rainwater gets carried through a series of pipes, channels, and rivers before eventually making its way into the ocean. So as you can see, this water is not cleaned or filtered at any point on this journey. That's what makes it quite different from our sewer system. Sewer system carries water from inside our buildings and in our homes, and it does get cleaned. The storm drain system, carries rainwater and other water from outside, and it does not get cleaned. So we're going to take a look at some of the impacts of these specific pollutants, starting with impacts from nutrient and fertilizer pollution. We often think of this as solely an agricultural issue, but runoff from pesticides and fertilizers can come from urban gardens and landscapes or agriculture due to over-irrigation or runoff from, during a storm. All of these extra nutrients from the fertilizers create what we call dead zones. Because those fertilizers and pesticides have high levels of nutrients, when there's a high concentration of these in the water, this causes something called eutrophication. Algae love all of the extra nutrients from fertilizers and pesticides, and they start reproducing like crazy, creating an algae bloom or a red tide, which we do sometimes have here on our coasts. An algae bloom doesn't last that long, just a few months at most, and then all of that algae dies and sinks to the bottom of the waterway. And then bacteria will come to eat that algae and causes the water to become anoxic, which means there's a lack of oxygen in the water from all of that bacteria. And that area of low oxygen is what we refer to as a dead zone. So one of the larger dead zones in the United States is in the Gulf of Mexico. This is due to runoff entering the Mississippi River and other outlets and flowing out into the Gulf. A more local example is the Salton Sea, which is where this picture over here is from. The Salton Sea, you may have visited it before if you are local to this area, but the sea was essentially created by accident about 115 years ago because there was a lot of agriculture in this area. And the farmers were pulling water in to water all of their fields from the Colorado River. They overdid it and burst an irrigation canal, and it took them a long time to fix it. So for a couple of years, the canal was basically flooding this valley, and this created the Salton Sea. In addition to all of that water, water from farms in the area was running off into the Salton Sea, and that contained really high levels of fertilizers and pesticides. And so they experienced a massive eutrophication event in this small sea, which has other issues. The Salton Sea is interesting in many ways, but it's a great example of how runoff containing high levels of nutrients can affect our waterways. Some other impacts from our neighborhoods include things like soap and motor oil, pollutants like soap and motor oil. Soap and motor oil enter our storm drains after we wash our cars in the roads or on driveways, after a leak in someone's garage that they hose down to the street, or just from having so many cars on the roads. These two pollutants can cause harm to gills, egg production, internal functions, and the growth rates of ocean animals as well. And oil and water don't mix, so that oil will sit right on top of the water. That's the rainbow puddle you can see on the right there. These pollutants can impact the entire food chain, whether the oil is blocking sunlight from reaching the ocean floor, or if it's being ingested by an animal, it can really impact animals at all levels of the ecosystem. So if we're washing our cars on the driveway or in the street, these pollutants will flow directly into the storm drain. Two other major pollutants are litter and food waste. Food waste can bring bacteria to our waterways, and both food waste and litter pose problems to animals if they ingest it. The number one kind of litter that we find on our cleanups are cigarette butts. Year after year, cleanup after cleanup, we find more cigarette butts than anything else. And this is so harmful for a number of reasons, but one cigarette butt can pollute 7 liters of water. So very quickly, we can see our oceans and our waterways become polluted by this tiny piece of litter that we don't think that much of. Pet waste is another significant source of pollution from our neighborhoods as well. This is regularly what our oceans will test positive for after a big rainstorm. That's why they close our beaches every so often. You might be familiar with the 3-day rule after a big storm or after a rain. It's advised to not swim in the ocean for a few days because all of this waste and all of these pollutants have just washed out onto our coasts. So with dog waste in particular, dog waste contains a kind of bacteria called E. coli. And a lot of folks think that their dog waste is natural, it will decompose. And while those things are true, it also contains E. coli, which is then picked up by the rainwater and carried into storm drains. Here in San Diego, we have so many dogs. Across the county, we have about 1.3 million dogs, which is almost as many people as we have living in San Diego. So we could make a really big difference just by picking up after our pets. And a few other impacts I want to mention that come specifically from our roads. San Diego is a very car heavy city, right? We all drive. So these two come specifically from our roadways, and that's brake dust and again, motor oil. Brake dust is the #1 source of metal pollution in our environment. And motor oil, we just have so many cars on the roads that it's inevitable that our rainwater is going to pick that up as well. So how can we prevent stormwater pollution? There are a lot of really easy solutions to keep our waterways safe. One is the reduced use of pesticides or fertilizers, or switch to natural if possible. There are a lot of recipes online for natural pesticides using things you probably already have at home that work just as well as their chemical alternatives. Fertilizers, if you compost at home, you have a great natural fertilizer there to use as well, instead of something that can run off into our storm drains and cause a lot of harm down the line. We also want to make sure we aren't sweeping our leaves into the street or down storm drains. And we want to make sure our gutters are clear of debris. We'll talk more about gutters in a few minutes, but as long as they're clear of debris, that's less that's going to be washed into the storm drains. We can also do our best to prevent irrigation overspray and runoff by keeping our irrigation systems in good repair and not over irrigating. If our sprinkler systems are running too frequently, that's extra runoff going over our sidewalks, picking things up and going into the storm drains. And then on the slides here, you can see we always recommend keeping your car in good repair. And when you do wash your car, take it to a car wash or wash it on the grass. At a car wash, they are required to recycle the water they use. So none of it should be running off into the streets and down our storm drains. And if you wash your car on the grass instead of on the road, your grass is going to filter out all of those pollutants. Grass is super hardy, so none of it's going to make its way into the groundwater either. And then of course, reducing our single-use plastic where we can and picking up after ourselves and our pets. There's so much we can do that really isn't that much of a shift, hopefully, from what we're already doing. We've talked a lot about pollution prevention so far, but I do want to shift gears a bit to water conservation. What can we do to reduce our overall water use? These tips might be things that we all have been doing, but we're going to share some stats. And now that we know a little bit more about our water usage and how it impacts the environment, hopefully the importance of these tips is underlined. So one tip that we have heard a lot, or certainly I did as a kid growing up in San Diego during droughts, is to really easy, turn off the water while brushing your teeth. And this can save up to 3,000 gallons of water per year. Similarly, turning off the faucet when we aren't actively using it can save a lot of water as well. A faucet can use up to 3 gallons of water per minute. So you likely don't need to leave it running. Very few times when you need to leave it on. You can turn it off while you're soaping dishes or soaping your hands. Every little bit will count. You can also do your best to take shorter showers. A 10-minute shower, this might be surprising, but a 10-minute shower can use up to 53 gallons of water. And showers can be up to 20% of a home's total water usage. So cutting that in half or even, in 3/4 will make a really big impact, not only on your water usage, but also on your water bill. Dishwashers over hand washing your dishes can make a big change too. Hand washing can use 20 gallons of water per load of dishes, whereas your dishwasher will only use 3 to 5. Even if it's not a particularly energy efficient dishwasher, still going to use less than hand washing. And a really energy efficient dishwasher will use closer to that 3 gallons per load. And again, I want to highlight the importance of maintaining your irrigation systems to prevent over irrigation and overspray onto sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. The less water we're using, the less water we're using outside, the less pollution we have going into our storm drains. So we're going to pause here for another Q&A, and then we'll really get into the rebate information in our webinar. So Rowan, I'll turn it over to you. What questions have come up so far?
Perfect. Thanks, Val. We actually had some really good questions. The first one I want to touch on is from John. His question is, I'm surprised to see that most of Southern California is in moderate drought, but most of Northern California is in severe drought. Doesn't Northern California normally get a lot more rain and moisture than Southern California? Why is the drought worse in the northern part of the state? And I answered it a little bit, just kind of touching on most of the water that is here in Southern California is transported. So we have a more varied water supply than Northern California. But if there's anything else that you would like to touch on, Val.
No, that's a really good answer. I can't think of anything that would be more than anecdotal evidence. In my experience living both in Southern California and in Northern California for a while, Northern California does seem to get more rain. So Rowan, that's an interesting answer, that our water sources are a little bit more varied, and maybe that's why.
Yeah, like most of it is transported, and in Northern California, a lot of it isn't. And I think that that's why it's considered more of, or Northern California is considered to have more of like this issue of drought. Another one we have from Gigi is when you were talking kind of about the eutrophication process. I think this is where this question is coming from. Can you define nutrients?
Nutrients, yeah. So things that fertilizers and pesticides, or fertilizers specifically, have that are going to help your plants grow, like extra nitrogen and things like that. When all of that extra nitrogen is washed into our waterways, the ecosystem there isn't equipped to handle that big influx of nitrogen. So that's just one example. That's going to definitely throw off the balance in the ecosystem there.
Perfect. Thanks, Val.
Yeah.
And then we have another question from John. Why aren't more storm drains covered with screens or filters to prevent more debris from flowing into the drainage system?
This is a question we get a lot. So I will assure you, you are not the only person asking this. It's a great question. There are a few answers. One is that when storm drains were created years and years ago, pollution wasn't a problem. So it wasn't really something they had to think about, or at least it wasn't a problem in the same way it is today. And now to go and install storm drain covers or grates is a pretty big endeavor, because they can really easily get clogged as that rainwater is washing litter and leaves and soil down the storm drain. Those grates can get clogged pretty easily. So there isn't a perfect solution yet for letting the water in and keeping the pollution out. But Rowan, I don't know, that's something we talk about a lot. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, it's mostly that there just wasn't, when the storm drains were being when the planning was happening, the pollution from like lots of plastic and different debris, it wasn't as much as a thought of, there wasn't as much of a need for these grates to be on there. And yeah, I do agree, it seems like we should have more grates on there on the storm drains, because they're really, really big. But yeah.
Great.
Let's see. We have another question from Tim. By total usage, where does our water go? Agriculture, industrial, business, households?
Oh, wow. That is a great question that I did not come across an answer to or look for an answer to while I was preparing. So that's something, let's hang on to that and see if our guests know. But if not, that's something I can definitely look up and get back to you, because I'm curious too. I don't know the answer to that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then we have one from Robin. Even if you run the dishwasher once a day, food, etc., can stick on and not come off when washed. Yet rinsing before putting it into the dishwasher can use a lot of water. What do you recommend? Should we wash more per day? Other suggestions?
I would do your best to use your dishwasher, once a day sounds great, but if there is something that is a little bit tougher, you can always pull that out and wash it, and it'll still be less water than if you had washed all of your dishes in the sink. So I don't have like a clear recommendation for that, but that's what I would say. If you have something that's really stuck on and you need to hand wash that one, it'll still be less water overall.
Perfect. And then one last question from Gigi. What kind of year was the storm drains? When were the storm drains kind of put in?
In San Diego, I don't know, but that'd be something we'd have to research. But the idea of storm drains, I know, has been around since like Roman civilization. It's like a very throughout history, you can find a lot of storm drains. So here in San Diego, I'm not sure though. We can find out.
I can go ahead and look that up and then answer it in the Q&A. And then Val, you can get back to the presentation.
Great, thanks, Rowan. Yeah, we'll keep going for now. Keep adding your questions. These are really thoughtful. I appreciate it. We're going to talk a little bit more about water conservation outside our homes, so in our yards and gardens, etc. So many of you might have yards or gardens that you currently water with a hose or tap water from a sink. And using rainwater instead not only conserves water and lowers your water bill, it's often better for your plants. So your vegetable gardens, fruit trees, native plants, succulents, and compost piles will all benefit from rainwater over tap water because there's no chlorine or chemicals from the treatment process, and it has a lower mineral content. Using rainwater also reduces our reliance on potable water and gives us pollution prevention through runoff reduction. So that's exactly what we've been talking about. Less water is being directed over our roads and our sidewalks, picking up pollutants because we're using everything that falls on our property. So let's look at some of the ways that the city can offer you rebates for making these changes. And we'll go through 3 different rebates, and then we'll take a look together at the application process. And we'll start with rain barrels. So you can receive a rebate from the city of San Diego for installing rain barrels. And this is great because your home already has potential to capture rainwater. 1,000 square feet of roof can capture 600 gallons of water per 1 inch of rain. So based on our local rainfall here in San Diego, that gives you an annual potential of about 1,800 to 7,200 gallons. That's going to vary depending on your barrel size and storage options, but this is kind of how you can estimate your capacity for rainwater storage. Rain barrels collect all of the water that would otherwise run off into storm drains, and rain barrels have a few different looks, but essentially your gutters are going to drain into your rain barrels. Here's some details on the rebate, and I'll go through all of these because I know that's quite a bit of information, but one thing to note is that the rebate program is only available to residents who receive water from the City of San Diego Public Utilities Department. And you can apply to receive $1 per gallon of storage for up to 400 gallons or $400. And to qualify for the rebate, barrels must be between 45 and 200 gallons each. So you can install multiple barrels, but the max barrel size is 200 gallons to qualify for this rebate. Your barrels need to be properly installed and shouldn't include any copper metals due to potential leaching concerns. And any overflow from your rain barrels needs to be directed into the landscaping. You'll need a secure lid and vector control, which means rodent and mosquito prevention. And your barrel must be UV resistant, so protected against sunlight. Without that UV protection, algae might grow in your rain barrel. The barrel needs to be maintained for 3 years, and you should be prepared for inspections or follow-up from the city. But as we go through these rebates, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A. After we go through these, we'll bring on some representatives from Think Blue and the city to answer your questions. So if any of these things you need clarification on, feel free to put it in the Q&A. One of the other rebates offered is for rain gutter installation. And rain gutters are a really important part of preventing soil erosion. Without gutters, rain can fall very close to your home's foundation, which can cause damage. However, it's important to know that gutters can cause erosion issues away from the foundation of your home since they focus water into one outlet. So it's important to direct downspouts to vegetated areas or landscaping rather than bare soil. Soil erosion prevents growth and leads to pollutant runoff or soil runoff from your yard. And so these gutters can be really helpful in diverting rainwater into a green space, a landscape, or a rain barrel, and it can naturally filter out some of those pollutants. Here's the rebate information. You can apply for a max of 250 feet of gutters, and the amount of the rebate varies by material. So for PVC gutters, you can receive up to $62.50. Aluminum, it's $312.50, and steel gutters is $500. Aluminum and steel last longer than PVC and can be recycled later on. The gutters must direct rainwater to a pervious area in your landscaping or to a rain barrel. So somewhere permeable, somewhere that the landscape can absorb it, or into your rain barrel. And to qualify, again, there must be no copper in your system due to those leaching concerns. And the gutters need to be maintained for 3 years. And again, you should be prepared for inspections or follow-up from the city. So those are two of the rebates. The last one I want to touch on, at least in detail, is a downspout adjustment. So you can receive a rebate for a downspout disconnect or redirect. And your downspout carries rainwater from the roof to the ground. So you can redirect it into your landscaping, so the water can be naturally filtered and not carry any pollutants into the storm drains. These downspouts can help conserve water for irrigation as well, because you won't be using as much from your hand watering or sprinkler system. And the rebate is $40 per disconnect or redirect. The rebate for downspout disconnects and redirects is in the rain barrel application. So we'll take a look at that in a moment and I'll point out where it is, but you can use the rain barrel application to apply for one or both rebates. And to qualify, the water must be directed into a landscaped area and away from property lines, neighbors, and structures. So the water should not cross sidewalks or driveways. The goal with this is really to get that water redirected into your landscaping. And vegetation in the area where it drains is definitely recommended to keep water on the property. And we won't be covering the other rebates today, but I definitely want to mention, before we look in detail at the application, that the city does offer other water conservation rebates, specifically for gray water systems and turf replacement. And that turf replacement rebate is in partnership with the SoCal Water Smart program. So if you're interested in either of those, you can find more information on their website, which we'll look at in a second. But regardless of the rebate or the application, whether it's gutters, rain barrels, or downspout adjustments, every application requires these items. So it requires pre-installation photos of the installation location. You need to install the item according to the program guidelines, which are really clearly laid out on the website. I'll show you where to find those. You also need post-installation photos, which includes 2 clear pictures of each item showing context. And the context is defined on those guidelines pages on the website. So that might look a little bit different for rain barrels or gutters. Once you see it written out, it should make sense what that means specifically. You'll also need your paid invoices or sales receipts. So showing the item, the store name, the purchase date, and the payment method. You'll need to submit that. You'll need a completed W-9 form as well. And that W-9 form can be filled out online. There is a link on their website. You can sign it through Adobe DocuSign. You can mail in your W-9 as well, but just know it's going to add a little bit of time to the overall rebate process. And you do only need to submit one W-9 form if you're submitting multiple applications. And then you'll receive the rebate check in about 6 to 8 weeks. One thing I do want to note is that any photos you upload need to be uploaded in a zip file. You can find instructions for that on their website, on WikiHow, on a quick Google search will give you instructions for your specific system or a laptop on how to create that zip file, but that is one of the requirements just to keep in mind. So let's take a look at the website together, and I'm going to screen share the website so we can all look at it closely, but you'll want to head over there we go, to wastenowater.org. And that's where you'll find all of the rebate applications and information. You can find some water conservation tips as well. And let's say we're interested in installing rain barrels on our property. I'll click on rain barrels to be taken to the guidelines, which I opened up early so we didn't have to watch the page load. But if you click on rain barrels, this is exactly what you'll get. And remember, one of the requirements was to install your item following program guidelines. You can find all of the program guidelines down here on page 2 of this document. So all of the specifics I was talking about, you can find even more detail here. Your rain barrel shouldn't block or restrict a narrow walkway. Copper materials are not allowed. There's a lot of information here that's important to know before you get your system installed. You can see this page also explains the value of the rebate, the benefits of a rain barrel, and the application requirements, which we just talked through briefly, but again, they're all written down right here. And notice the specific photo requirements. So right here is where you can see that context we were talking about. For rain barrels, you'll need 2 clear photos of each rain barrel. Now I clicked it a little early, but you can, let me back up so I can show you where that is. You can access the application right from this page. This blue link right here, submit the rain barrel and downspout redirect application. You can also find the W-9 form right here too. Let's take a look at that application together. Again, you can see a few guidelines at the top and the W-9 link, really handy for you. When you submit this application, you'll also be taken to the W-9 form as well. But let's scroll through this here. It asks you for your first and last name. And then this question here is how you heard about the rebate program. You'll enter your property address and then your mailing address as well, but only if it's different than your property address. You'll want to enter your account number, which is located on your water bill. So it's your City of San Diego Public Utilities account number. And if you rent your property and are filling this out, or if this applies to you, if the property owner name is different, you'll include that. Same for your HOA information. If your HOA pays your water bill, or if this applies to your property, make sure to include that. And then as you scroll down, you'll enter all of the information for the rain barrels you are installing. So it asks for square footage of your roof. We will be linking a calculator in the follow-up email to help you figure out the square footage of your roof. You just need a few details about your property. You'll need the total number of rain barrels connected to downspouts and the total number of new redirects. So these are important if you're applying for that downspout redirect rebate. Continuing on, you'll need information on the capacity, cost, and manufacturer model and number for any of your rain barrels. You have a lot of space in case you're installing a lot of barrels. And then here's where you put those attachments. So remember, your attachments need to be uploaded as zip files. You can find the handy link right here for how to create a zip file, but you need your pre and post installation photos and invoices or receipts with the requested information right here. You'll read through all of these important details and then check these boxes and submit your application. If you're interested in the gutter application, it looks very similar, just with different specifications for what your photos should include. And the downspout adjustments, like I said, are in this application as well. So I'm going to switch back to my slides. See a lot of questions coming in, so that's great. We'll get to those briefly. If you need help or have further questions beyond this webinar, I want to mention that our Waste Free SD hotline is available to you. You might know Waste Free SD is our recycling hotline, but we're also available to help with this specific application process. So I'll put that number on the screen at the end. You're welcome to give us a call with any application questions. Just a few frequently asked questions I wanted to run through. First one, do I need to submit my W-9 for each application? You can submit it once for multiple. Am I required to use a specific brand or company for this installation? There are no specific brands or companies required, as long as your purchases, your rain barrels, your gutters fulfill the guidelines and the requirements. Do the rebates cover labor? They don't, they just cover materials, and specifically just the item the rebate is for, not the other materials or components that might be needed for installation. You can apply once you have finished the entire installation if you would like. And if you set up your rain barrels with a pump system, unfortunately, that will not qualify for this rebate. It must be a hand watering method. So a watering can, a hose hookup to the barrel, or Oyas. And then how do I estimate the square footage of my roof? There's a calculator link right there if you want to jot it down super quick. Otherwise, like I said, it will be linked in the follow-up email. So for any other questions, feel free to add them in the Q&A right now, and always make sure to really closely review the guidelines for the rebate you're applying for. There is a lot of information in there about what does and does not qualify. So we'll get into those questions shortly, and we'll bring on our Think Blue representatives in just a second. But I want to thank you all for being here. This is the end of my portion pretty much. We hope that you leave today with a better sense of why water conservation is important and how you can save water in your own home. We do have a lot of other events coming up. You can find them all on cleansd.org. Specifically, we have a great recycling workshop coming up this Saturday that will be entirely in Spanish over at the Malcolm X Valencia Park Library. So check it out. You can register at CleanSD. And we also greatly appreciate the support from our donors and our community. So if you're able, feel free to scan the QR code to donate and support environmental education programs like this webinar, so we can continue bringing important topics to the San Diego region. So I'm going to turn it over to Rowan. I know she has a quick survey for you all. On the screen, you have some contact info. I'll leave this up for a few minutes, but Rowan, I'll pass it over to you to bring on our guests and launch that survey.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Val. So thank you for everyone joining us today, and a special thanks to Think Blue San Diego for funding today's webinar. We're going to be staying for a few more minutes, probably like 10 to 15 more minutes to answer the rest of your questions, but I'm going to send out, it's going to pop up like in a little pop-up section, a quick feedback poll. And this really helps us develop future webinars and learn what works and what doesn't work. So take a minute to fill that out. I'm going to do that right now. And then I'm going to bump up our panelists from Think Blue. All right.
Thanks to everyone who's filling out that poll while Rowan's bringing our guests on. We appreciate it. I'll pop open the Q&A here.
Thanks, Val.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, almost done promoting the panelists up. It's kind of taking a while.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your patience. We have a really great panel of folks coming on. I want to make sure we get them all set up appropriately. We definitely want to make sure we get to all of your questions. I'm scrolling through right now and there are so many good ones.
Looks like we might be missing one panelist. I'm not seeing Mike Ismail pop up.
Okay, I'll keep an eye out for Mike Rowan if you want to get started.
Perfect.
Posing questions, give our guests an introduction.
Yeah, awesome. So we have our Think Blue reps here to talk to us and answer some of your questions. I'm just going to introduce everyone. We have Mariah Mills, who's the associate planner. We have Andrew Funk, who's the senior planner. We have Brian Hojanaki, who is the supervising management analyst. And we have Mike Ismail, the associate manager. Hopefully I can find him. And then Vicky Kalkertz is the senior planner at Think Blue.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. We appreciate having some experts to answer our guests' questions.
Yes, I will go ahead and look through some of these questions. Val, feel free to do this as well.
Yeah.
Looks like from GG, we have, is rainwater better for the plants than reverse osmosis water?
I could jump in on that one. Rainwater often has like a little bit of nitrogen in it, which can be beneficial for the plants, give them a little bit of like growth boost. So you'll often notice that they're like extra green after the rain. So when they're irrigated with rainwater, you'll kind of notice a bit of that as well. And also just has I think with reverse osmosis, there's no minerals at all, and they do need a bit of mineral content. So I think that rainwater might be a bit better than the reverse osmosis.
Awesome, thank you so much. And then I had a few questions about, and we kind of answered some of them, but why are we not able to use copper for the rain barrels?
I can answer that one. Copper can be toxic to aquatic organisms. So when it runs off of pipes and any outdoor gutters and that kinds of things, it can contaminate stormwater and cause problems for our waterways.
Awesome, thanks. One to follow up with that, I have a question from Thomas. It says, I have copper downspouts. Is that an issue?
I mean, it can be. So we don't want to promote them, but I mean, if you have them, it's at the end of the world, but we don't want to promote them because they can cause water quality issues. We do actually have TMDLs for copper in some of our water bodies, so we have to really be careful about preventing copper from getting into our waterways.
Perfect, thank you. From John, we have a question. Are residents of other San Diego area communities like Chula Vista eligible for rain barrel system rebates?
Well, I can answer that.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, the other agencies, MWD, Metropolitan Water District, also offers rain barrel rebates. And so you can go to their website. It's at SoCalWatersmart.com. And they also have all the other rebates for washing machines and toilets and fixtures, if you want to get some of those other rebates. But yes, you can also get rebates for rain barrels through MWD.
Great, thanks, Brian. I have a question from Gigi. How long can rainwater sit and not go bad in the rain barrel? Does San Diego get enough rain to last the year?
So that one, it can depend on what particular barrel you have. So I would definitely check the instructions for your barrel, but a lot of times the smaller, like 50-gallon barrels, they'll recommend that you only keep the water for about 2 weeks, not too much more than that. Some of the larger barrels, I'd say like 100 gallons and larger, they're constructed to preserve the water quality within the barrel for quite a long time. So you could keep it for many months, like throughout the summertime after it stopped raining, and you'd be good to go. And then as far as your second part of the question, yeah, we do. We actually, even though comparatively to other parts of the country, we don't get a whole lot of rain, you definitely get enough to easily fill your barrels. And depending on how much storage capacity you have, it could last a couple weeks or a couple months, depending on your setup.
Thank you so much, Mariah. Another question from Robin. Is the rebate taxable? Is that why they want the W-9?
I can answer that. The taxable issue is for an agency, if we are to provide you, say the city of San Diego, if we paid you more than $600 for rebates or other, reimbursements of funds, once you hit that $600 limit, then you would have to we would have to send you a W-2 at the end of the year, which would show how much you were given by the city, and then you would have to pay taxes on it. But under $600, it doesn't trigger that. Hope that answers your questions. There is legislation moving forward trying to make these water efficient rebates non-taxable, so that just like you get on energy credits that people get on their taxes, we're trying to push for water credits as well for any water efficient devices.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Let's see. We have another question from Pam. How do we use gray water easily on our property?
We also have a gray water rebate. If you go to our website at wasteandwater.org, you can see our rebate there. We have a gray water rebate. It's a diverter valve that you would use with your washing machine. And you install that diverter valve and you can turn it from going into your drain to the sewer, or you can convert it to move out to your landscape. So we do have a rebate for that. So please check it out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. A question from Robin. Will you be recommending folks, or at least a type of service provider that can help set up these types of systems?
There's not a lot out there. There's one that I've seen and heard of. I think it's called Catching H2O. But if you do a Google search, you may be able to find some here in the region. But I know they're one of the ones we see a lot of people using. But yeah, go ahead and Google search and see what else you can find. Other plumbers should be able to help you out for any of this too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think this question kind of ties into that last one. Is installing a rain barrel, this is from John, is installing a rain barrel and downspout system a pretty easy DIY project for most people?
It is. The downspout might be, if you already have a downspout, you can tap into it. You just kind of cut it off where the barrel starts in. But if you don't have rain gutters or you don't have a downspout in place, then you're going to have to get up on the ladder and up on the roof to install it. But it just depends on what you have already, and how handy you are, of course. But yeah, if you get a barrel yourself and you have a downspout, you can fairly easily do it yourself.
Thanks so much. We have another question from Thomas. Do the barrels typically come with filters necessary to keep out mosquitoes, etc.?
Most of the ones, yes, from Home Depot that you get that are designed as a rain barrel, they should have all the components on it. Some folks will just get a barrel that's just a big barrel, and it won't have the components. But either way, it's one of the requirements of the rebate is that you have to have a screen on there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We just have a few more questions. We have another one from Gigi regarding the copper. What about copper pipes in the house for drinking for people?
I can't really speak to that. As far as I know, it's perfectly safe, but I am not a drinking water expert. So I don't know if Brian has any insight into that. I know you're from PUD. I'm not a drinking water expert, but I know it's a standard issue to use it. So I don't believe there's any issues with it.
No, there's not. And I believe it's also just the way that the water is produced and filtered to make it drinking water. It doesn't have the same effect with copper piping as rainwater. So obviously, water is it's filtered a certain way with certain chemicals and things like that. But it's different when it's coming straight from the sky.
Great, thank you. One more from John. I learned that the Padre Dam in Santee, they have an advanced purification process to turn wastewater into drinking water. Is this kind of water recycling a long-term solution to water scarcity in the San Diego area? What about desalinization?
Yes, we do have a desal program up in Carlsbad. And if you ever drive up the coast, you'll be able to see it. It's right along the coast. So yes, that is a large regional desal plant. Also a pure water program, or direct potable reuse is what it's typically called, where they're taking raw water, taking gray water, black water, and filtering that and putting it back through the filtration system again, and making that drinkable water. And yes, it's the city's long-term goal. It's a regional long-term goal, is to use that technology. It's reverse osmosis. Basically, it's a very large reverse osmosis process, and that's what the city is building right now. And yes, it's used all over the world. And we have one here, and it's not up and running yet, but it's about halfway done.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. And the last question we have is kind of tying back to the question we had from Pam about gray water. This question is also from Pam. Can we also divert gray water from our showers, baths, and sinks?
Yes, part of our rebate that we have also allows for that. And I believe it's up to $1,000 for the rebate, but it will require some permitting and some inspection by the city departments and developmental services as an alteration. But yes, you can reroute your showers and your showers and sinks to your gray water. To landscape.
Awesome, thank you. Looks like one more question just came in, and then I think we're about to wrap it up. This is a question from Gigi. Does the water recycling to potable take out medications and pesticides?
Yes, it does. Right. Yeah. And I just want to throw out one other piece of information. The city has what's called the Urban Water Management Plan, and it's on our website. You can Google that, and it answers a lot of the questions that have come up in this seminar, which is it's a 5-year planning document, but it tells you where our water goes, where it comes from, how we're going to clean it, how we're going to conserve it, all the different things that are in there. Really, really neat document. That has a lot of great information about our regional water for the city of San Diego. But it's called the Urban Water Management Plan. Oh, there we go. Valerie just put it up there.
Yeah, is that the right one? I saw you link that in the Q&A. So
I did, but that link I put in didn't work for some reason. But yeah, good. I'm glad you got it in there.
Definitely. Great. Well, I think that's all we have time for. Thanks, Ron. Are there any other questions we need to address, or?
I wanted to just follow up really quickly on some of the questions from earlier. One about the storm drain age. It's quite old in some parts of the city. It just sort of depends on when urbanization happened there. It can be up to 100 years old in some places, or as young as 5 years old in others. It just sort of depends. It's basically whenever we got urbanized. And the question about grates over the inlets, that's actually just for flooding purposes. If we flood very easily and we have so many inlets and catch basins, it's just not feasible to be able to clean it every single time it rains, and it's not safe actually. So we are working on some pilot studies on figuring out different types of filtration and like grates to put over them, in lack of a better word. But we do already have a lot of systems in there, like there's catch basins that are inside the inlets that do catch a lot of the trash and debris. You just don't see it. It's actually inside, and they get cleaned out every year. So we do have a process for that, and it is just for flooding purposes.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thanks for addressing that. That is a question we get a lot, so I appreciate the extra insight
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, we're working on some pilot studies. Mariah's team and Andrew's team actually is working on some of those studies right now, and we're looking at adding some of those we call them trash capture devices. This isn't a very fun name, but throughout the city. So we'll be
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to the four of you. We really appreciate it and appreciate your expertise. For those of you that are still here, I just want to note we are going to be doing another round of this event at the end of March. So keep an eye out for that event. We'll be going over the rebate information in more detail, hopefully in person as well. So keep an eye out for that. But thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Bye.